Hello and welcome at ChessTip's Step 1 demo lesson. Today's lesson is about castling, and as I explained in the introduction video, normally I would start by checking your prior knowledge, but since you're not here, I'm going to make it easy on myself and we're going to skip that part. Important to know is that the prior knowledge necessary for this lesson would be the concept of check and the concept of attacking pieces. But like I said, we're going to assume you know, and we're going to start the lesson on castling. Well, let me start by asking a question. What word can you recognize in the word castling? I didn't say it would be a difficult question. Indeed, it's the word castle. And that's exactly what you do with castling. You're building a castle. Well, second question, why would kings live in a castle? Well, obviously because they could. If I could afford the rent, I would live in a castle too. But mostly they did it to be protected against their enemy. After all, a castle has a strong wall and towers with guards, so they can easily see the enemies coming and be protected. Well, with chess it's no different. Up to the 16th century, when castling was not allowed, games would last really short because the king proved to be really exposed in the middle of the board. After the rule of castling was introduced, and the king would hide safely in his castle, games would last a lot longer. Well, how is castling done? Well, I already gave some of it away. It is done by the king on its initial position and also the rook on its initial position. As you can see here, both the white king and the black king are on their initial position, and also the white rook and its opponent, black rook on a8, is on its initial position. This is important when you want to castle, because it is only allowed to castle when the pieces involved are on their initial position. But if they have moved and would return to their initial position, unfortunately in that case, castling is also not allowed. So not only do they have to be on their initial position, but it is also not allowed for them to have moved during the game. How is castling done? It's quite easy actually. You pick up your king, you move the king 2 squares, and place the rook on the other side. This way of castling is called castling short. It is also allowed to castle to the other side. I'll show you. You pick up your king, move it 2 squares, and place the rook on the other side. Note that I start the move of castling with my king, by moving my king 2 squares. If I would start by moving my rook, my opponent would be well in his right to claim that I'm making a rook move, as opposed to castling. So when you want to castle, always move your king first. Well, let's look at another position. This looks a lot better because in the previous position, castling didn't look that good because we didn't have a wall. In this position, we do have a wall. Again, we pick up our king, move it 2 squares, and note how fine our castle is. We've got our walls, we've got our tower to protect us, and it's the same for the black king. If we move the black king 2 squares and place a rook on the other side, also the black king is well protected in his castle. Note as a side benefit that the rooks are connected and participating. That is a nice side benefit when it comes to castling. Unfortunately, castling isn't always allowed. And now we're going to talk about when it isn't allowed. We're going to go to the next position. In this position, castling isn't allowed. And why isn't it allowed? Well, I already gave it away at the start of this training. It isn't allowed in white's case because both rooks are not on their initial position. So castling is not allowed for white in this position. And even, like I said, if the rooks would move back to their initial position, castling would not be allowed. And why isn't black allowed to castle? It's a little bit trickier, because both rooks are on their initial position. So what is wrong? Well, It's quite easy actually if you take a closer look. Note the position of the black king. It's not on its usual initial position e8, but it has moved the square to d8. Thus, castling is not allowed in this position. There are more restrictions on castling. We're going to take a look at them. Castling is also not allowed when there are obstacles in the way. The path of castling needs to be free. In this case, black is bothered by this annoying opposing rook. It can't castle short because it would have to pass the rook, which obviously isn't possible. And it can't castle long either because there's a knight in the way for the rook. The rook can't possibly move. So castling long is also not allowed. There's a different set of restrictions when it comes to castling, and they have to do with the concept of check. That's why I said it was important that the concept of check was well grasped by the students. In this case, it's really easy. As you can see, the black bishop is attacking the king. Check is given. When check is given, it is under no circumstance allowed to castle, even though it would come in handy. Fortunately for white in this position, he does not have to move his king to protect it, because after that castling would never be allowed, but he could simply move his pawn and perhaps if he wants to, castle the next move. There are more restrictions that have to do with the concept of check. It is also not allowed to castle when your king has to pass a square where check is given or ends on a square where check is given. In this case, white can't castle, well, obviously because there's a rook missing, but let's ignore that fact. But he would also have to pass a square that is attacked by the black bishop, which isn't allowed because that means check would be given. And if we look to the other side, we see that the black knight on c3 controls the square d1, and thus again the king would have to pass a square if it would be castling, and that isn't allowed. So castling for white isn't allowed in this position. For black it's even worse. Well, not worse, but more dramatic. If black would castle short, it would be bothered by the white bishop on e6 because the black king would end on a square where check is given. Same goes for castling long. He would end on a square where check is given. So that is basically all you need to know about castling. Castling is not allowed when either of the pieces involved is not on its initial position or has moved during the game. It is also not allowed when obstacles are in the way. And it is also not allowed when check is given or the king needs to pass or end on a square that would result in check. Well, this is all I have to say about castling. Let's take a look at one of the exercises in the workbook. This is one of the first exercises in the workbook. I'm gonna let you think for a while, and the question is black allowed to castle short in this position? Though many of you are eager to say no, black is not allowed to castle short because the rook is under attack, as you can see here. The rook under attack, however, is no restriction. The black king does not have to pass a square where check is given, nor are there obstacles in the way. Both pieces are in their initial position. So in this position, black is allowed to castle short. Well, this was the lesson on castling. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it inspires you to watch the next video. Thank you for watching.